Hello again out there. I'm Knud Eriksen. We're here in a two-day seminar in Denmark. And I'm sitting here with Dr. David Duke. I've been lucky to catch him between things. And of course, Dr. Duke is so well known to most people that I hardly need to introduce him, but I'll do so anyway. He has been a defender of white people and white people's interests for more than 40 years, longer than anyone else today that I know of, except maybe his good friend Don Black of the Stormfront Internet Success, who probably holds the record together with him. This has earned Dr. Duke nicknames, of course, like Mr. White, and accusations of racism. That's how it's done today. We can't avoid that probably. And you've been after the power Jews, as I call them, and you call them Jewish supremacists, I know, for about the same number of years. No wonder they are a bit paranoid about you. But let me introduce you a bit more, because maybe somebody out there still don't know you, or they've heard something wrong about you from our beloved mass media. David Duke, Dr. Duke, is a writer with two bestseller books to his credit, My Awakening and Jewish Supremacism. The last one has now been translated into, I think, some 15 languages, maybe more now. Mm-hmm. And I have had the honor and pleasure of translating it into Danish recently. Dr. Duke has written hundreds of articles and also given hundreds of interviews on radio and TV, and he's probably had much more professional people interview him than today, but we'll have to live with it. Okay. Dr. Duke has also been very active in American politics as a Republican candidate, running for both governor. What you hear in the background is our very cozy fireplace. He's been running also for senator in his home state of Louisiana. He didn't win these seats, which is pretty difficult with all the media against him.
And I won one seat.
Yes, but it's so difficult when you don't have the millions and trillions that your opponents have. And still, Dr. Duke won about 55 to 60% of the white votes in these elections. Pretty good with that kind of opposition. He has today a doctorate in history, teaches and lectures all over the world, and has his own radio and video channel and a website which you can reach at www.davidduke.com. And he might just become the next American president if Mr. Obama is removed in disgrace because he cannot find his birth certificate. And if an enormous amount of Americans wake up to David Duke's obvious message and talent. Now, I know this is not your first visit to Denmark because I met you about 4 years ago, and we've known each other as good friends since then. We've been together at private occasions, had good times. Also some very more demanding times, like the time in Spain, for instance, where Dr. Duke's book was published in Spanish, and I toured with him to several Spanish towns amid screaming communists and burning cars.
Yes.
And
it's a normal state of affairs.
That's just business as usual for Dr. Duke.
Of course.
And we were together in Memphis, Tennessee, where we prevailed against all odds. He was cancelled on several hotels where we had to have the conference.
Terrorist threats and so forth. Yeah.
Terrible things happening, which you think would not happen in a country like the United States, where you have this First Amendment freedom of speech, so-called. We didn't feel that much the freedom of speech that day. Anyway, do you bring some particular news or information for us Danes this time?
Well, I don't know if I bring a great deal of news to you, Knud, but I think that every Dane, I think those of you at home who are listening to this with an open mind and an open heart and a really good mind, because it does take intelligence sometimes to see through the fog of the news. You can see what's happening. You don't have to have news from a foreigner or news from a non-Dane. You see the changes going on in your streets. You see the changes going on in your media. You see the standards and the traditions of your lives changing. You see the values of your nation changing. And every Dane, and for that matter, every European, every German, every Frenchman, every Pole, every Italian, every Russian, every American, every Canadian, every New Zealander, every Australian, we're now in a crisis where we may lose everything that's dear to us. The things that are really dear to, I think, a person are his family, his traditions, his values. Europeans have a great and a powerful tradition, a wonderful tradition of art and literature, music and architecture, a unique impression to the world, as there are unique expressions and impressions from all races. And I think every race has the right to be preserved, to have its freedom, to have its independence, and to create and to maintain its culture as it sees fit. But today the European people are being told that it's somehow racist, that it's hateful, that it's that you're being told at home. If you stand up and say, well, let's keep Denmark Danish, and I want my children to look something like me, my grandkids and great-grandkids to look something like my forefathers and foremothers that came before us, that they want them to have the same joys, the same music, the same trends, the same values. You're told that's being evil. And the truth is that's not racism. Racism is about suppressing a race. And the truth is that you and I and the various themed Dr. Christian Lintner and so many other great activists here in Denmark are really not about suppressing race, but recognizing the beauty and the expressions of mankind and the unique expressions and preserving those expressions and preserving the freedom of people to preserve their way of life and to have this unique diversity that exists on the earth, rather than being wiped away and made everybody to conform in this sickening globalism. So I don't think I bring you any news. What I'm doing maybe, and you can judge for yourself, you who are watching this at home. I think I'm bringing something that you already know, but I think people have the ability, the true ability, to understand and recognize truth when they hear it, and that's why my videos are going crazy around the world, and that's why I think more people are listening to the things that I have to say.
Yeah, and exactly that was a point I would like to take up with you, because I really do think, that's not to flatter you, but I think really you are famous for your brainy eloquence and good looks, of course. something the Jewish supremacists hate.
Well, I can't take any credit from that. That's totally my parents. I had nothing to do with anything
right,
about looks.
So I can't. You're administering it well, we could say then. Well, because that's a problem if people can't communicate all these nice things or very sensible things. They drop to the floor with them, and this is of course a problem we have in this movement, that not enough people are good at this. So you started with this video project about a year ago, and you can tell us something about the success.
Yeah, I'll make a comment too about that, and it is a philosophical comment, and I'll see if you agree with me on this issue. I do believe in aesthetic beauty, but I'm certainly not somebody who's crowing about my beauty. I mean, the way we look basically is how we're born, which we're not responsible for, but we carry on a tradition. But I think all of us can be healthy and take care of ourselves and be neat and appreciate beauty. I'm not so much concerned, about a person's particular features or their particular beauty. I'm really more concerned about the value of how somebody lives their lives. That's my major concern. And for me, I'd much rather had a compliment paid because I was a man who stood up and told the truth and been honest, then because some people like maybe the way I look, or some people like different aspects of me, and all of us, no matter what we look like, no matter how tall we are, how short we are, no matter how thin or heavy, no matter how poor, no matter how rich, we can all have a noble spirit. We can all have a noble soul. We can all do things in our life that contribute to communities rather than destroy communities. And I believe it's time for true members of citizens of Denmark and true Danes and true Europeans to stand up courageously, because we are now in a battle that's the most important battle in our long existence on this planet, our battle for our very survival, whether our right, whether our people have the right to actually live and our children have a right to live. We have the right to go on as a unique expression of life. You know, even a cockroach will scurry away to try to preserve itself or save itself. Every breed of life does, and we have that basic right. But unfortunately, the big problem is not how people look among our race. The problem is how, whether or not we have the courage to do what's necessary and to tell the truth on these critical issues, and to fight for our people's survival.
Yeah, that is a problem, whether people have the courage, really.
Yeah.
And it also
Yeah.
affects their intelligence, is what I think.
Yeah.
Because you see people, even clever people, rambling along because they can't really confront the tough subjects. And you've been doing that. I think you made 50 videos, and of course you have hundreds.
68 videos.
68 now, and you've done, I would say, maybe thousands. Maybe that's exaggerating a bit, like radio talks, radio.
Well, thousands. It's easily, yes. In the last 40 years, I think I've never calculated to the perfect example, but I'm sure I've done more than 3,000 radio interviews. I've done at least 1,000, more than that, because I've done so many newscasts. I would say 1,500 times I've been interviewed, at least in a news clip in my life. I've given well over, I'd say, 1,500 speeches in my life. I've written, I did try to calculate this once, I've written at least 4 or 5 million words, many hours of research, on these things. I've traveled now, I've tried to calculate it, I've traveled somewhere around 5 or 6 million miles during this time. Constant travel, speaking, but I've done this, and I'll tell you something. I'm not looking at this like a great sacrifice. I'm looking at this as a privilege.